Hello, good evening, and welcome to another exciting time where we talk about business. It is Business 101, and my name is Blyden Ukem. In Business 101, we look at the fundamental issues regarding the world of business, exerting pressure and analysis in certain areas of businesses, and looking at the nitty-gritty of it. Important questions are usually being asked, and in today's edition of Business 101, we'll be talking about the sports business in Nigeria. We'll look at the most important questions: development of sports, the growth of it, the opportunities in sports business and industry. Where is African business in sports compared to the rest of the world, and the position of Nigerian sports business compared to the rest of the industry in the world? We'll view the conversation from here and look at the critical aspect of it, beginning from here. Ever wondered why some countries win medals while others do not? Do they have ability to win medals if they participate in sports events such as the Olympics? In developing countries, there are a number of economic concerns regarding sports. Arguments are made that a country's performance in sports, in particular Olympics, is relative to its economic resources, and that achievement in sport should be measured in terms of a country's gross domestic product (GDP) per capita and investment in sports. A well-organized sport development structure and a high level of funding can propel a country to the top of the medal table. A population is likewise silent in the discussion of sports and its businesses. And with 1.4 billion people, China was well represented at the 2020 Olympics medal table, with a total of 88 medals won, trailing only the United States of America, which had 118 medals won, a country with more than 300 million people. Let's look at the facts on sports and economic development, how it plays out. The three strongest markers of sports development in any economy are the degree of investment in that economy, investment in sports also, the extent of the population participation, and the level of political stability that exists in that country. High investment correlates positively with buoyant economy, which has a knock-on effect on the amount of leisure time utilized. With more leisure hours, a larger proportion of the population can indulge in sports. Developed economies make significant investment in sport facilities, coaching skills, and sports science support programs, all of which are essential for sports sustainability. Sports investment can be an effective stimulus for developing the quality and quantity of sporting activities, especially at the international level. The positive correlation existing between political stability, investments, and the 2020 Olympic medal table shows a clear disparity in the number of medals won between countries with stable political systems and those battling political instability. For example, let's look at details of analysis. Across the world, we've talked about the number of medals won by China, 88, and the United States of America, 118. Let's look at that particular event. Nigeria finished 74th at the Tokyo Olympics, 8th best from an African perspective. Team Nigeria won only 2 medals, 1 silver and 1 bronze, after being represented by 55 athletes. Ese Brome won the bronze medal from the women's long jump events. Blessing Oburududu won the silver medal from the wrestling events, women's freestyle 68 kg. From an African perspective, Kenya was number 1 in Africa and 19th in the world, with 10 medals in total, 4 gold, 4 silver, and 2 bronze. And it brings the conversation in another level now, where Africa is, where the rest of the world is. And today, in the business of sports, we'll talk about the nitty-gritty of these areas. Why is Africa here compared to the rest of the world, despite having a large population compared to the European countries? If population is a factor, why is Africa backward? The conversation continues because my guests are standing by, and we'll get to talk about the details of these when we return from this break. Don't go anywhere.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people. But there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTimes DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Hello, welcome back. It is Business 101 and my name is Blyden Okem. In today's Business 101, we're looking at sports businesses in Nigeria. We'll also x-ray how this gets to affect Africa and as well as the impact of these compared to the rest of the world. My guest is already here. My guest is a sports enthusiast, especially when it has to do with cricket, an administrator, Akanimo Kufre. Akanimo Kufre, good to have you on the show.
Thank you, Blyden. It's a pleasure to be here once again.
Time.
Yeah.
But today on a different set.
Definitely, we are looking at the aspect that makes us grow better in the business of sports.
All right, let's get to the talking point as it tips off immediately. It would be about the business of sports, and many people get to wonder what sports business is all about. Is it just about becoming probably a footballer or making a career out of sports? Are there other facets to the business of sport? How big it is? And that will be the first question going to my guest. Let's begin a conversation there. We see sports all around the world. If you want to use football as a case study, especially in Nigeria, it seems to be the biggest sport, but cannot be compared to what we see in European football. You're looking at cricket, such a big sport, which I know you are quite interested in. Rugby, the Rugby World Cup is ongoing. But Formula One, today I was listening to the salary cap at Formula One with the likes of Max Verstappen earning £55 million, and that's a humongous amount of money, and it goes on to show how big this sport is. compared to the very best of sports in Nigeria, football. And look at the Nigerian league, nothing to write home about. But let's first of all look at sports as an industry. How big is it?
Well, thank you, Blyden. The biggest thing that we can talk about in sport is branding and sponsorship. And then when you have the market and the audience, I think it can attract somebody to drop a bigger risk and then take part in that. Like you mentioned in your intro, the number of the volume of people that we have and businesses can also attract the sponsorship. Africa, like Nigeria, we have a lot of population that can attract business. But the challenge we have is how do we package it to attract this sponsorship? So when you look at globally, golf is said to be the one, the sport that attracts the biggest pool of fund. But in Nigeria, football is the top. So what do we do in Nigeria, like the NPL that is coming up soon? We have issues of delay, and that was mentioned also to be because of those who are supposed to have the rights, the TV rights. So somebody must have a reason to be part of the race of sponsorship. So today we should look at what are the things that we have done to make it attract sponsorship. Even in the state government recently introduced revived the Governor's Cup, and we have seen how that has trickled down to the man on the street, to the woman that is hawking. And I think it is time for us to look at the business of sport, and it will reap very well for us.
Absolutely. Time to look at the business of sports and how it can reap very well for us. In recent communication happened this morning, we talked about it, how the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince was talking about the opportunities that could be available in sports. And he talked about the GDP growth, sports bringing 1% involvement, bringing 1% in that GDP growth every moment. And it makes sense from that angle. The question would be from an African point of view, what is the contribution of sports in the GDP growth of the country? Let's look at a bit of statistics. In 2022, according to Statista, an agency that collects data globally, it indicates that industry revenue amounted to $487 billion in terms of sport, and a growth compounded on annual rate to 5.2% between 2022 and 2023. And the projection is that by 2027, the global sport market is expected to boom to $623 billion, and this is a huge one. When we look at Nigeria, for example, or Africa, for example, the stats shows currently that revenues and market that comes from sports in Africa compared to the rest of Europe, which stands at $487, is only a meager of $5.27 million. It goes on to show that there's a huge gap. Despite this industry being such a huge industry, Africa has not tapped into it, though there are positivity that there's potential for 9.02% growth in Africa moving forward till 2027, and we can see improvement in Africa to about $8.49 million. Let's look at Nigeria in its case also. Nigeria currently is projected to grow by 10.27% in sports, resulting in market value of $2.04 million. Quite low when you look at global contribution in sports. And one might begin to think, what could be the consideration? The weakness. What is the biggest bane of Africa as a society that we're not taking sports seriously, or sports hasn't developed quite well in Africa?
Okay, Blyden, I think what we need to look at first is the core of what is business and sport.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, when I look at that, from my own perspective, is management.
Yeah.
Okay, because you talk about athletes management, you talk about managing the team like a coach, you talk about sponsorship. It all boils down to the quality of the managers we have in the sporting industry. Do we have technocrats involved? Do we have round pegs in round holes? So this is where we have, like the football, for instance, which is the major sport in the country. We are looking at the set of NFF board and the league management committee stepping out the game a bit better than what we had earlier. So we are going to see a better league for football, and we can see sponsorship coming into that when you have a reliable management team to manage that league. Because we have stories in our football that somebody can win a trophy or a league, and up to a year after they do not have their money reimbursed, that is the prize money. So the quality of the people that manage it, the off-the-field activities, whether in facilitating or making sure that sports activities go on well. So coming down home like in Akwa Ibom State, we can see that the crop of person coordinating the Governor's Cup this time around is different. And we are certain to have a better result because we have the likes of a seasoned football administrator talking about the Paul Bassi. You can see that a lot of sponsorship were around there. You could see brands that I don't know if you permit me to mention, but it was a good thing to see up to 5 or more brands who were there on the panel, pitch panel.
All right, let's look at something. You've made mention of a key point.
Yeah.
Management, those involved in running the sports.
Yeah.
It could be a typical concern in all directions from a Nigerian point of view, and Africa, quite concerning, having the right people to handle their affairs. So you are saying one of the biggest problems is the wrong people have been handling their affairs or sports in the country.
Certainly.
One of the things I try to avoid us talking about is narrowing down to football because it cuts across other areas. Cricket, you're a lover of cricket.
Sure.
As someone that's
Sure.
enthusiastic about cricket. We talked with Ntense Williams some time ago, also interested in rugby and the frontier in rugby in the country. But we've not really harnessed these aspects. And many people are not even aware of other sports. Awareness is also a concern one way or the other from a different angle to it. So now while we're looking at it, let's move to the world of cricket, for example. What is the biggest problem for cricket? Is it that of awareness? Is it that of finances? Is it also a matter of management, quality managers being part of it?
Okay, I think the whole three can go along, but incidentally, the trouble that we've had in football, that's the management, we do not have it in cricket now because we have a perfect person, I call him Cricket Titan, talking about Uyi Opata, the NCA president. He has been able to bring a board and people that could make perfect the pathways, the plans, the objectives to make sure that cricket goes very well. Now, coming down to management, I mean the challenge of cricket not spreading is equipment that has been the major part of it because unlike football, you just put the round ladder and individuals with their boots go there and get the jersey and then start playing. But in cricket, you see that a lot of technical activities involved. The ball that you are going to use, in like the rainy weather we have around this community now, you can't play cricket now because you spend more. You have to roll in the mat to cover, I mean the tarpaulin or a cover to cover the pitch.
But one of the concerns would be interest.
Interest.
Many people are not really interested in cricket because they are not aware of it.
Okay,
but
we get
before
that.
you get to continue talking on cricket, another guest joins the conversation if you're reading them. He's a sports analyst, a teacher, and what do you have to do with grassroots football and sports in Akwa Ibom? That is a known name if you're reading them. If you're welcome to the show today.
Yeah, welcome, Blyden.
Good to have you. We know how your schedule is tight, especially what you had to do at Eket. What's happening at Eket today regarding the kids that are performing over there?
Some of the kids are already at in by Black Football. So today was like a presentation of scholarships, also Akwa Ibom State won in Ondo State, first edition or second edition of the Black Football. So government school of Eket with the national champion who presented the scholarship.
All right, let's look at the talking point. We're looking at sports business in Nigeria. And one of the concerns we've talked about, especially from Kanimo Kufre, has been that one of the biggest pain what it has to do with developmental sports in the country is that of management, having the right personnel to handle different aspects of sports in the country. We've also looked at the popularity of football and the limited popularity to other sports. Let's have your view regarding this. What are the major challenges when it has to do with sports development in the country?
I have to say the biggest challenge we have in Nigeria is facility, maintenance of those facilities. I have to start with Akwa Ibom. Immediately, the former administration came in. They started building sports centers across the state. And we happen to have one at West Secondary School, the West Sports Center. And I can tell you, most of athletes at the state level who have not come to represent the country have come through having that facilities to go there and practice virtually all it becomes a success story. And I have to say this, the facilities are the biggest challenge. But if they have facilities for across every local government,
All right.
all of you
All right. You're saying
around because they
facilities
have
are the
to
problem.
go and do every leisure time.
Okay. Now, when we're looking at sports development, two concerns have been noted out. One being that of adequate personnel to manage sporting activities in the country, and the other being that of facilities, according to Ifeok Redenham. But let's look at other sector of it, because when we're talking about facilities, Akanemo, we have to look at awareness. Also, there's limited awareness. You've also already mentioned branding, but for brands to come and sponsor these sporting activities, first concern would be how aware is the sport, because it's a business. People have to be interested in it. On the other hand, looking at it from a grassroots point of view, how can you get young individuals, young talents to be unaided and then join this sport? That's the concern, because people are not even aware of some sports in the country.
Okay, I would want to go back, no, not fighting my colleague there. If you're, I would want to stand and build my points around management, because if you have management, they will understand that facility is part of it, the athlete is part of it, the organizing of the event is part of it. So when you have a proper management, there won't be a challenge with facility. Now, going back to your last question, which has to do with talking about the awareness. That is where some of the sponsors will now come in and then attract the crowd or add to the crowd. Because already in some sports, you have to build the crowd to attract the sponsors. The sponsors will gain from that crowd. They will now reach to the crowd with their product and services. So the awareness, for instance, what we have built to do with cricket was that we had training courses, which incidentally I was part of those who attended a training course that was facilitated by an expert in sport marketing and branding from South Africa, talking about Eddie Famba. So he took us through the process that is familiar already, how to create a champion, how to create a hero, how to popularize what you know that is good about the sport. So that is where I took particular interest to make sure that cricket was popular. And I think one of the major breakthroughs that I had was that I tried to force it on a lot of radio and broadcast stations across the country from a pool that I had. And the biggest success was when I noticed a particular chap in Edo State and River State, they would take to cricket activity followership, reporting the news without waiting for me to send it across to them. I think it was my biggest joy. It was my biggest thrill. So what you need to do is to plan out with the management team of that particular sport, of that particular federation, that particular association, and tell them the value of partnering with the media.
Okay. While we're talking about values of partnering with the media,
Yeah, Blyden, I would like to come in.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I would bring up a simple story. In 1996, when Nigeria were clamoring to have the best Olympic out, we were better than South Africa, we were better than Great Britain. Fast forward 20 years later, they are better than us. What did they do better? They had more coaches than play athletes in that competition. The coaches went there to learn. They invested in a lot in coaching, train personnel, and making it work. When their coaches returned to South Africa, they didn't stay in their offices. They didn't stay just on the field. They went to school. That's when we were much younger. You could still remember the Let's Play initiative was brought about. Where kids from 3 years forward started involving themselves in different sports. And I believe most of that Let's Play initiative produced arguably some of the best and I have the greatest players that played cricket, rugby, some fine footballers, and knew what South Africa had a chance of hosting the World Cup. Great Britain today, or let me even put it England, had no female soccer team when Nigeria were dominating qualifying for a certain stage. But today, England are essentially they are European champions. The league in England is short.
All right.
Because their winning goes back to the grassroots, go back to school. You see kids at kindergarten age practice football. There is so much involved in education and sport. I believe that should be something that should be done in Nigeria. I'm not a big fan of separating Ministry of Education and Ministry of Sport. It should be based together. Country.
All right, good point, Ifyok, there. Talking about matching education with sports, and it makes a lot of sense from that angle because it seems to be the outlet from the most developed countries, from the US to Europe. That's a major of education and sports, and it's been working out very well. And your point about the growth of sports in South Africa compared to Nigeria, when Nigeria did quite well, better than South Africa at the 1996 Olympics. But quite sad, at the last Olympics, Nigeria was placed 74th in the world, 8th in Africa. South Africa was 8th, was 3rd in Africa. But Kenya was number 1 in the world, rather 19th in the world, number 1 in Africa with just how many medals? 10 medals, 4 golds and 4 silver and 2 bronze medals. Uganda second and South Africa. So it's a long way off compared to the US and China, who were number 1 and number 2 at the last Olympics. Well, let's look at some other talking points beyond just developmental sport, because we tend to narrow it to just these athletes. If you was mentioned coaches, have mentioned, we've talked about athletes, for example, in cricket, football, and the rest. But let's look at other indices that could be important in terms of someone going into sports, because sports development is just not all about the athletes and the coaches and those in direct administration. It's different facets. It involves people that are into equipment retails, event management. Everyone can be part of sports and good molding. And coaching also very important. Sports business idea. You came into here and you popped up an idea, which I won't let it out, but we get to talk about it. Broadcasting and social media, it's something that people can earn from sports also. Marketing and PR, nutrition and dietary advice. Not a popular story when it has to do with nutrition and dietary in Nigeria and Africa, but we know it's a critical element in sports. And here's the one I want us to talk about, adventure and tourism. How big is sports when it has to do with adventure? Certain level of sports or certain sports cause serious attraction to certain countries. And from a Nigerian point of view, we've not really utilized sports.
Okay, I would always come back home when we compare these facts and figures. Looking at Nigeria, I think Akwa Ibom has become an authority when you talk about sport tourism.
In what way?
Okay, just recently because of the Nest of Champions.
Yes, absolutely.
That has attracted the Super Eagles. And I remember talking to a couple of them, including the captain, the son of the soil, you would say. A couple of them were optimistic that the Nest of Champions attracts favors to them winnings. And if you look at the record, I think they've had 8 victories out of 10 games that they've had here, about 11 games that they've had here. So for sport tourism, you notice what happened in Ikorekpene around where the Super Eagles camped. There were a lot of people camping in smaller hotels. Their business activity was on the peak because some of them would have business contract to do with the players. Some of them would just come to have a snapshot. Had somebody that called me, a couple of people that called me, please, how can I get access to snap with the players? And I helped 1 or 2 of them. So you see that in terms of tourism, there's a whole lot of activities that trickles down to the common person on the street. Right from the person hawking, the hairdresser, and other sport activities, food.
Yeah, hospitality
industry,
a huge one
hold on. So we have our leaders, our policymakers, we need to draw them to open their eyes to the opportunities. And going back to one of the bands that I have always advocated to be the problem, management. If you do not have somebody that manages facilities, like my brother Ifyok mentioned, you wouldn't have the facility there.
Right.
The facility was provided by the last administration. If you do not have, like the Nest of Champions, properly managed, like the
football has really improved.
But
it also goes in tandem with what Ifyok talked about. There ought to be availability of facilities and the right people to manage them.
Proper.
Government or private sectors ought to be interested in this. But we'll go on a short break. When we return, we'll be talking about the sporting activities and the business of it, and looking at the private sector involvement in it. There's also a big talking point in the world that would be prize money. Equal pay for men and women. We'll also analyze that. We'll also look at the impact of climate in all of this. For example, there have been complaints from Europe when it has to do with the Nations Cup. The Nations Cup gets to be